Andy, my dude, have you heard of the magical website builder known as Squarespace?
Ugh, not another Squarespace ad. I feel like every podcast is sponsored by them.
Hey, don't knock it till you try it. Yes, okay, it is overhyped, but actually it lives up to the hype. Squarespace is like a website fairy godmother. With a click of a button, your site transforms into a beautiful masterpiece.
A website fairy godmother? That sounds interesting. What makes it so magical?
Well, for starters, those slick templates make anyone look like a professional web designer. Pick one, customize the colors and fonts to match your brand, and voila. Plus, the drag-and-drop fluid engine is so easy, your grandma could build a site on Squarespace.
Well, she did knit me a lovely scarf last Christmas. Maybe website design is next.
Exactly. And when you're ready to sell your Nana's handmade scarves online, Squarespace has built-in e-commerce. Add a store with one click. Get flexible payment options. Then watch those sales roll in. And when she wants to teach others her steezy scarf skills, Squarespace's new courses feature is just the ticket. Nana can set up her curriculum and enrollments and payments in a snap and become the next e-knitting influencer.
Oh, wow, you really sold me with the grandma angle. Sign me up for that free trial.
Just go to thenextreel.com/Squarespace and transform your site into a beautiful Squarespace masterpiece.
Well, thanks, Pete. Even though it's overhyped, Squarespace actually sounds perfect for Nana's site's needs. Appreciate the warning on the ads, though. I'll brace myself next time I listen to a podcast.
Anytime. Let me know if you need any help getting that site up and running. Andy, can you believe we've almost hit 700 episodes of The Next Reel?
I know, it's crazy. And with all the other episodes in our family of podcasts, we are well over 1,200 episodes of movie conversation. It's really pretty amazing that we've gotten to have these in-depth movie chats every week for over a decade now.
And we couldn't have done it without our loyal community of film fans. Their support over the years has meant so much.
For sure. That reminds me, we should give the merch store a shout out. Buying shirts from thenextreel.com/merch is a great way listeners can continue to support the show. Plus, they get to sport our great designs.
Absolutely. I think sometimes folks forget we have a variety of shirts, mugs, phone cases, and more available. In fact, a great place to start is with a shirt sporting the Next Reel's logo.
We also have that classic Fast Times Spicoli Surf School tee, or the weirdly popular Rusty's European Tour shirt.
The one from National Lampoon's European Vacation. Why is that so popular?
Search me, but we have sold a ridiculous number of those. I guess there are a lot of Rustys taking trips to Europe?
We're always adding new designs based on movies we've covered, like our brand new design for a streetcar named Desire, featuring a streetcar named Desire. So if you want to rep your love of TNR and films, head to thenextreel.com/merch.
Every purchase helps us continue to have these weekly in-depth conversations. So visit thenextreel.com/merch today.
And as always, thanks for listening and being a part of the Next Reel community. We've got lots more great movie chats coming your way. I'm Pete Wright.
And I'm Andy Nelson.
Welcome to The Next Reel. When the movie ends,
our conversation begins.
In just a matter of seconds, you're going to hear a classic episode of this show from back in the day when we called ourselves Movies We Like.
It took us a while to settle into the show's format, so you'll notice some differences as you listen to these episodes. For instance, it takes us a bit of time to actually get into the conversation about the movie. Things like that.
But we're still proud of the conversations about the movies themselves, and we think they're worth keeping in the library.
So enjoy these episodes from our back catalog. And you can become part of our Discord community, learn more about the show, and find out how you can become a supporting member at thenextreel.com.
So thank you, everybody, for downloading and listening to The Next Reel. We appreciate your time and attention, and we hope you enjoy the show. This is The Next Reel, everybody. I'm Pete Wright, and that there is Andy Nelson.
Hey, hey, hey.
And we spoil movies. In just a matter of seconds, you're going to hear a classic episode of this show from back in the day, long before we had a website, or listeners, or taste, or class. We called ourselves Movies We Like, which was, with the benefit of hindsight, A terrible name.
But before we send you through the window of time to gaze your earballs on movie podcast history, you should learn more about us at thenextreel.com, subscribe to the show in your favorite podcast app, or follow us on Twitter and Facebook at The Next Reel.
And if you decide to become a regular listener of this show and you're interested in supporting our ongoing work on our other series like The Film Board or The Speakeasy and Trailer Rewind, please consider a regular donation to us through our Patreon page at patreon.com/thenextreel.
All the contributors are invited to join us in our Slack channel, where we have tons of fun, and they are entered to win our regular contests, guest spots on this very show, all sorts of good stuff.
So thank you, everybody, for downloading and listening to The Next Reel. We appreciate your time and attention. We hope you enjoy the show. I want to know from you, when you think about this movie, what is it? And just, I mean, I know we've been talking about it for a couple of days, talking about doing it for the show, but I want to know, very first thing from you, what's the first thing you think of when somebody says to you, Raiders?
For nearly 3,000 years, man has searched for the lost Ark of the Covenant.
The Bible speaks of the Ark leveling mountains and laying waste to entire regions. Not something to be taken lightly. No one knows its secrets.
Jones, do you realize what the Ark is? It's a transmitter. It's a radio for speaking to God.
An army which carries the Ark before it is invincible.
The Ark, if it is their Adonis, then it is something that man was not meant to disturb.
It is protected by forces beyond imagination. It is desired above all treasures on earth by those who are good,
Trust me.
and those who are evil.
I'll tell you everything.
Yes, I know you will.
Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Better go.
First thing I think of is that of all movies I've seen in my life, which is a lot of movies, that this is the movie I've seen more than any other movie. When I was a kid, my friends, I can't remember their last name, but their names were Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Very biblical family.
Matthew, Mark, Luke, and Andy. You're just hanging out
yes,
with the
right.
They're apostles, right?
Right, exactly. It was like Jesus' sidekick. That's kind
you were totally the spiritual fourth wheel.
That's right. Yeah, pretty much.
The holy quadrangle.
But they had it on VHS. I never saw it in the movie theater, so they had it on VHS, and we would watch it like literally every single day. And it was like the first movie that I remember seeing that I was just so exhilarated by, that was like not a cartoon, you know. I was enthralled by the whole story. Like, it was just, as a kid, it's all the adventure you'd ever want, you know, all wrapped up in a perfect movie. So, we must have watched it every day for that whole summer, and, you know, probably long after that.
What's sort of magical about this movie, and I don't think you can say this. I don't think you can say this about the other two that we're going to acknowledge as part of the canon, and then the other one, Stepchild. I don't think you can say this about those other movies. They age so well, sort of psychically, you know. When I think about this movie, it means as much to me as it did. I mean, when I saw it, let's see, it came out in 1991 or 1981, right?
Yes.
And so let's see, what were you in 81? You what, 9, 10 years old?
I was 8 years old.
8 years old. Okay. Yeah, I was 9. I was 9 years old when this came out. I did see it in the theater with my dad, and I remember this real sort of visceral feeling that I thought it was so magical that my dad could be as excited, every bit as excited on the edge of his seat about this movie as I was.
Yeah.
Because up to that point, every movie that we went to together was, you know, he was really taking me to a movie. We weren't really going to a movie together. You know, we weren't both going to share the experience. It was always going to be kind of a different experience for me.
Right. It was either, him taking you to a kid's movie or you kind of tagging along to a movie that he probably shouldn't have been taking you to.
Exactly. And which I didn't get. And, what are you going to do? And this movie grabbed me and my dad together. And I think that was sort of a pivotal kind of point in our relationship. And that's why, this movie hits me square in the chest. When I think about it, I've been thinking about it since we decided to talk about it, that this movie has an impact on me. I wonder what as we were sort of researching the movie, we kind of figured out where the inspiration for the screenplay came from. Mm-hmm. And I'm fascinated by the fact that a lot of the inspiration came from these, the 1930s and 40s serials.
Oh yeah, right.
And that's more of an obvious kind of genetic play. But Uncle Scrooge.
Yeah, and that to me strikes me as a very strange one. The serials definitely. I think that George Lucas has talked about that many times, about how he was a fan of the serials, and he always wanted to do something like that. In fact, I think he started working on this in the early 70s, trying to actually make a modern serial in like the early 70s. But then I think it was I think it was Spielberg, when he got involved later. He wanted to get more of that kind of just kind of the fun and all the booby traps and all that sort of stuff. And he actually pulled a lot of that stuff from old Uncle Scrooge comics, which I think is the strangest place to get inspired for something like that, but it worked.
Well, were you into the comic books as a kid?
Actually, I think have a few Uncle Scrooge comic books, believe it or not.
You have a few Uncle Scrooge comic books?
I do. They were not the ones that I'm sure were inspiring Steven Spielberg, but I definitely have some probably from the 80s. As I recall, I have one that revolves around, it has a very Phantom of the Opera sort of theme going on.
You were always ahead of your time.
I'm going to have to pull that out now.
That's fantastic.
And reread it.
I was very much into the Transformers comics. I had the comics, and I was very, but I never got into these into the Disney stuff, and never. I hadn't made the connection that Uncle Scrooge was Donald Duck. Not really. We're right. Isn't that the thing? He's Donald Duck.
No, he's Donald Duck's uncle.
Duck's uncle. All right.
Right. He is the Uncle Scrooge.
Right. And so there were the kids.
And then there's Huey, Dewey, and Louie, right, the nephews.
Okay.
And they would always be getting into trouble. And as I recall, they were the ones who were getting into trouble. And I can't remember how Uncle Scrooge tied into it, if he was, getting dragged along, or
he was the one setting the traps, like with the punji sticks and the don't step into the light.
Yeah, right, exactly. Right. And all of the arrows that shoot out of the walls.
Yes, with the poison.
Yes, right. Trying to get those damn nephews out of his way.
So, talk to me. You're the between us. If there is any sort of orbit around screenwriting genius, that orbit would be pulling toward you.
Oh well, thank you for that.
So
sure.
You're the pro here. So tell me, pull a little bit of the pacing of the script apart, will you? Because that's one of the things that I really noticed. Right, this is and the early reviews, really highlighted this, and I think it's an important thing to talk about this movie, that the pacing of this film is perfect.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that stemmed from the genre. I think doing an adventure film, by nature has a lot of exciting stuff in it. But I think what they did is they found a story that they brought a lot of really interesting characters into it. And you always hear people say, it's about the character, and I think that's what people complain about when they talk about modern adventure films or other big genre films, is that they find that the characters are lacking. And this is one that you've got just a lot of really meaty characters. So you've got Indiana Jones, you've got Marion, you've got
I got sidetracked looking for Ronald Lacey. Can you tell me off the top of your head
who Ronald Lacey is?
Well, he plays Tot.
See, now you're looking at IMDb right now, you fraud. Would you have known that before?
I would not have known that before. But you know what? Of all of the images that are just permanently burned in my head, the image of him melting will always remain in my head.
Yeah.
And I think it's because, maybe it's just because as a kid, when you see that happen, it's just such a shocking thing to watch. But also, I have this set of special effects books that I got when I was a kid. And they talk about the special effects that went into the making of this movie. And they showed how they made him melt. And I was so fascinated. And they have this still image in the book of them melting him, and basically he's like a wax figure, and they have hair dryers off screen that they're like blowing on this wax to melt it, and they're doing a time lapse of the actual melting process, and then when you watch it in full speed, it looks like the guy is just melting right there, and when you put all the sound effects in it, you're convinced it really is a person melting.
They say now I'm following along with you here, and I'm reading the background of what they were doing there, and it's exactly what you just said. But what they say here is they filmed it all with an undercranked camera.
Right.
What does that mean? What is the effect that we get from an undercranked camera?
Well, it kind of is like time lapse. Undercranking means that you're cranking. In the old days, when you actually had to hand crank a camera, back in the silent film days, there was a crank on the side of the camera and you would turn it, and filmmakers got very in tune with the camera, and they knew how to turn it at just the right speed, which was, it wasn't 24 frames per second back then. It was somewhere just a little off, like 20 frames per second. I can't remember what they were playing, but they got really used to turning just at that exact speed. So when they would play it back, it always looked normal. If you undercrank a camera, what that means is you're, over the course of a second, instead of, let's just in modern day, instead of 24 frames per second, you're now getting only, say, 18 or maybe even 12 frames per second. So when you actually play that back at 24 frames per second, everything is going to be moving much faster than it normally would. Just like when you overcrank, that's essentially creating slow motion.
Okay, so that's how we get the it's almost sort of a stop motion looking thing when he's melting.
Yeah, it in a way, although it's instead of stop motion where they would take a frame. Somebody goes in and manipulates it, take a frame, like what Ray Harryhausen does with all of his puppets. Instead of kind of doing that old school way where it's moving puppets and making them move, this is a process where the camera is still clicking off pretty quickly at pretty quick intervals, but it's just something that's happening on screen that they're going to actually make look is happening a lot faster.
That was a terrible scene.
It was gruesome.
That end scene. There were a couple things going on. So Tot's head is being melted. Admiral Dietrich? Colonel Dietrich. His head was a hollow model from which I'm going to read as a balloon, from which air was withdrawn. So he caved in on himself. That was Colonel Dietrich. And let's see, there was another bit that, the rest of it was, obviously they use a lot of underwater and a lot of smoke to get the ghostly look. But one of the things that I thought was really interesting about that, and we're totally jumping to the end here, but
it's all right. Everybody's seen
it. Here's hoping. This is the thing that struck me. The fire scene right at the very end when the canyon is consumed by fire. Mm-hmm. That was shot upside down.
Interesting.
It was a miniature. The firestorm that cleanses the canyon was at the finish was a miniature canyon filmed upside down. And I've been trying to figure out. Because I read this after I watched the movie again, and I'm trying to figure out what is the effect that they get by flipping it over with the fire. I guess it was it's more the rolling. I don't even remember it. See, now I'm just so lost in what I'm remembering. I can't even visualize it.
If I'm remembering, not only would it have been upside down, but maybe also it would have been played in reverse, because isn't it where all the flames and everything kind of, after they all kind of shoot through the canyon, then it all kind of gets sucked all back up into the arc.
Yeah. You're right.
And so it's just one of those effects where because I think by having it upside down, they can have the flames like blowing up into it, and the natural movement of the flame is it's going to hit and it's going to kind of move and fold along with the contours of the canyon. So by flipping that over, it looks like this, heavenly fire, I guess, is basically coming down from the heavens and spreading through the canyon. So I guess I can see how it would work. That would be an interesting little outtake to watch.
It would be. I wish so badly that there was more sort of frantic documenting of these films that are so important to me. I mean, the behind the scenes kind of ancillary footage on the re-release DVDs and Blu-rays isn't as good as I want it.
No, and that's something that I have found, and it seems to be more with Spielberg when he releases his films on video formats, or I guess not video formats, but on disc formats. He doesn't seem to put a lot of extras. There's not a lot. I know he's not somebody who likes doing audio commentary, but even like the behind the scenes documentaries and everything, I mean, they have very Hollywood produced sorts of behind the scenes documentaries, but they don't seem like, he doesn't seem very interested in letting people into the real secret behind the filmmaking, as it were, like George Lucas is on the Star Wars discs, where I think there's probably at least 5 times more behind the scenes footage than there is actual film.
I wouldn't be surprised if he's not retouching the behind the scenes stuff too.
Yeah, probably.
What a Lucas.
Jeez, that man.
Why do you think? I don't know. I wonder. There are people. If there is a sort of a cadre, a catalog of people of men like us who were introduced to romantic relationships through Indiana Jones and Marion Ravenwood.
Well, that's a very interesting type of romantic relationship to be introduced to.
Come on, man. Tell me you did not have a total crush on Marion Ravenwood. Are you kidding?
No, I did. I'm just saying their relationship was very antagonistic at times. And I think that it would have been probably for the best that I didn't use it as a model when trying to find girlfriends. I would have expected to get smacked in the face with a mirror or something.
Which is exactly as it should be.
That's right. No, probably what I deserve.
It's probably it's better than you deserve.
Yes, it is.
I woke up as a man to this movie. I'll tell you that. She was in that when she's on the boat. Beautiful, what's her name? Karen Allen?
Karen Allen, yep.
She's fantastic. I love their relationship is really appealing to me. Not just that she was incredibly hot to me in 1981, but their relationship is appealing to me. I'm trying to figure out why.
Well, here's another thing that I think made her attractive, not just as a woman, but as a character, is that she wasn't just a cardboard woman that he had to come in and save. I mean, right from the start when we meet her, she's drinking with the best of them and, can hold her own against not only the little drinking scene, but also against all the Nazis who come in and invade her and her father's bar. She's tough. No, she is tough. The character is tough, and she is pivotal. She is a pivotal character in the movie. Right? Yes,
I think when she becomes replaceable, she becomes less interesting.
Yes,
right. I guess when I look at this movie, and I look at sort of the big action movie of the last couple of months, what would it be? Well, I don't know. When did Transformers come out?
That was last summer.
Was it last summer? Oh man,
The big
I'm seeing him late. What is it?
I know. Well, I mean, you had a lot of. You had Thor. You had Captain America. You had
Thor is a great example. Thor is a great example. Why is it a great example? Because here you have a woman who is far more capable than the role she was given to play.
Yeah, it was a very weak role. We're talking about Natalie Portman. Her character in Thor. It was a very just kind of. I mean, you could have cast any unknown in that role, and it really wouldn't have made a difference.
Ultimately,
it was completely forgettable.
Totally forgettable. Totally replaceable. Totally pivotal. Right? I mean, she was a bullet point.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, I hate to say it, but I think, you know, and I know we were, you know, not going to be touching on the ugly redheaded stepchild too much, especially in this conversation, but I think that to a large extent, that is kind of what they ended up doing with Marion in the fourth Indiana Jones movie. Yeah,
you're right. We should, well, we got to say it because it's out there now. I mean, she's back in that movie, and talk about replaceable. She was in that movie because she was a bullet point. She was a bullet point. It's like she was a checkbox. Well, what are we going to do with Marion? She was in the other movie. Wouldn't it be funny?
Well, it was almost like this. I can see them brainstorming, like trying to figure out all the great things that they did with the series. And, you know, I think a success in recent sequels in, like, I don't know, the last 10, 15 years is they've been really working at bringing back, like, all of the key characters. You know, in sequels in the old days, like great sequels like Gremlins 2, for example. I don't know why that one came to my head. But, you know, very few characters from the original continue through the series, even if it is a good movie. But I don't remember when the point kind of shifted, and all of a sudden it was like they wanted to bring as many people along for the sequels as they could. And it was like they felt like, oh, well, let's bring back Marion because she was so great back in the first movie. But then they didn't do anything with her character. No. And, you know, the thing that always sticks in my head now, unfortunately, with Marion is her driving like a buffoon in the Jeep as the Jeep, you know, flows down the river. Right. And it's just like, seriously, this is what you're going to do with Marion? It's a complete betrayal.
Because, you know, it's dishonest. It's a dishonest portrayal of that character because you have experience with the character that is vastly different than what they are giving her in that sequel.
Yeah. It's exactly what, it's turning a great character into a buffoon. And it struck me as Jamie Lee Curtis's character was a buffoon in True Lies.
You loved True Lies. Oh, you did. You loved that movie. Stop talking.
You know, I actually did like it when I first saw it, and the more I see it, the more I just.
Right, that's on the list. We're gonna have to talk about the movie. Here's the thing I want to. You made me think about, and I know we're gonna do the other Indiana movies.
Yes,
too,
definitely.
But you know, it's interesting. Like I don't think I've ever thought about it in this context. There are 4 Indiana movies. The first one is Raiders. The second one, I didn't know until today. I've seen the second one not as many times as Raiders, but a lot of times.
Sure.
Was a prequel.
Correct. You didn't know that?
Didn't know that. It's been 25 years.
Wow. That's interesting.
It hasn't been. Oh, jeez. I did not know that. I did not know there was a prequel. And it was largely not a very good movie. But we'll talk about that. The third one. I like it. The third one I quite liked. The fourth one was largely not a good movie. So for me, I'm wondering, like, the weight of this series, and I'm going to get to the question. The weight of this series is largely held up on the shoulders of Raiders of the Lost Ark. Mm-hmm. Right, and
definitely. Well, yeah, right?
I mean, that's where you think of Indiana Jones. You're thinking of the tarantulas on Alfred Molina's back. You're thinking of the Boulder Run. You're thinking of the the wonderful hat chase of baskets in the square.
Basket chase, right?
That is just fantastic. And you're thinking of the monkey. And please, are you not thinking of Bad Dates? I mean, that's the best. how often when you think of Indiana Jones are you thinking of Om Nom Shivaya as you're reaching in the heart? That's not the thing that comes to mind.
I actually think of that one quite a bit for some reason.
You're a horrible person.
I am a horrible person.
But the weight of the and I still haven't even gotten my question yet. That wasn't even my question. That was anecdotal. My question is why didn't this series become our James Bond?
That's a great question. I think the easy answer is that James Bond had all of the Ian Fleming novels to use as a basis. So they actually had a huge supply of stories. I mean, not a huge supply, but they definitely had a good supply of stories to kind of go with. So they were able to kind of pull from all those Ian Fleming novels and kind of just tell all those stories. This one, they didn't have that. And so they had to come up with original stories every time. And I think that they could have if they had planned that. But I think, filmmaking is one of those things where you start getting involved in another project, and next thing you know, it's 10 years later, and nothing has been done with it. And I think that's why there was such a gap between the second and the third movies, and then obviously an even bigger gap between the third and the fourth movies. And the other thing about it is because there wasn't that basis before the films started getting made, like because there wasn't a whole series of books or George Lucas's The Adventures of Indiana Smith serial stories, as he originally titled the movie. By the time that this movie got made, George Lucas, Steven Spielberg, and Harrison Ford all had become such big names that you couldn't just send off, Steven Spielberg or Lawrence Kasdan or George Lucas to write this story. All of a sudden, it became this elephant that they all had to be involved in, and that was the big holdup in getting the fourth movie made. Is because Harrison said he would not sign off on a script or he wouldn't do another one unless he felt that the script was absolutely perfect. And same thing with George and Steven. So all of a sudden, instead of just one person, a la Ian Fleming, writing all the novels that he wanted to, you had these three big Hollywood players, all with big egos, who wanted to get everything exactly the way they wanted. And it's a shame, because I think this could have been an amazing series to do, like the James Bond films. I mean, how fun would that have been to kind of be following these stories of Indiana Jones?
What's sad? Belloq.
Why is that? Why is that sad?
Because I think in the long list of firsts that this movie introduced me to, his character was the first complex villain, right? I mean, that there was this sort of Nazi thing, and that Tot was real. I should be fair. Tot was the monster, right? But Belloq was the nemesis.
Yeah.
Right? And he was complex and
he was suave.
Fascinating character.
Yeah.
It's hard to find characters like that. You watch, I mean, all the way to the very end. The whole thing is it's like this glorious sort of chase scene, right? And they all the way through the sort of waves of the movie, and they meet after Indiana thinks that Marion is dead, and they meet in the bar, and everybody has guns. Everybody stands up, and that's such a great scene. He goes outside, and he meets Solly. He's rescued by all the kids, and yet even in that restaurant scene, you can tell that Belloq really, if Indiana would turn around and say, you know what, dude, let's just go find this Ark together. Let's just run off. We can do this. Everybody else is just, they're idiots. Why are we playing in the sand with these idiots? And
what there's actually a line in that scene that I think is a very key line that happens quite a bit between protagonists and antagonists in a film. It's the "we're the same, you and I."
Yeah,
line.
yeah.
It happened. That line comes up all the time, and it's a great element to have in a script, because you're really looking at your protagonist and antagonist as essentially almost like two characters who are on the same path, but one goes left and the other goes right. Mm-hmm. And so they're almost like these mirror reflections. And it's always interesting to have that as your protagonist and antagonist. It gives a lot to a story, because you can see what Indiana Jones could become if he chose to take that other path.
And when you look at not just the sort of cinematic arc of this movie, when you look at the overall arc of the series,
rather than the Covenant.
There's a setup, and that's good. It's a banter. That was practically a bit.
Almost planned.
That almost feels like that's missing the nemesis, right? Like it feels like it's much more of a whirlwind through the rest of the films, and you miss the Belloq kind of suave antagonist role. It's not as complex and interesting. It's just sort of good versus evil, spy versus spy.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
You don't get that as much, and I think it's a fault with a lot of modern screenwriters and filmmakers, because they're responsible for getting it out there, is that they let it slide. They don't spend the time to come up with another Belloq character.
Yeah. There was an incredibly strong cast.
Yeah, I'm just looking at it, and the one that just kind of,
Alfred Molina.
Alfred Molina, always just fantastic to see him in the beginning of the film. I just have always loved that.
He's on my list of best friends who've never met me.
I have a good list like that too.
Yeah, I'm sure we'd be close.
Exactly. But the one that strikes me, which I never even realized, is the man who played Katanga, the boat captain,
right?
George Harris, and I've recognized him, but I didn't ever realize where. But he was in the Harry Potter movies.
Well, wait! Don't say it. Don't tell me. Really?
Yeah.
That blows me away. He was Kingsley Shacklebolt.
Shacklebolt.
Yeah. Yep.
Shacklebot. That's the Transformers version of him.
Man.
It's the Shacklebot.
That's amazing. Oh man.
It strikes me as funny, and I don't think of this all the time, but when I see somebody that I saw in a movie as a kid, who I may not have seen since I saw that movie, it just instantly makes me like them all the more.
Yeah.
It's like, oh my God, he was in Raiders of the Lost Ark.
And yet Ronald Lacey, Major Arnold Todd, 147 movies that dude's done. I wouldn't be able to tell you a single one of them.
No.
Amazing.
No.
John Rhys Davies was fantastic as Sala in the whole...
yes, he was great. We all know him now as Gimli. I think that's probably what more people know him as. But
I was going to say Sliders.
I've never seen Sliders.
Yeah. Well,
I've eaten Sliders.
Your nerd cred is... it does not hold a candle, my friend.
Well, here's something nerdy.
All right.
Do you know that Frank Marshall actually is in the movie?
Frank Marshall's in the movie. He was brought on as a producer, right?
Right. I don't know if he was brought on as a producer on. He was a producer on this film, wasn't he?
So he was. You're saying he was in the movie?
He was a producer on the film?
Oh, please! I know who he was. Are you ready for this? Are you ready for this?
I love it.
Reggie.
He was a pilot.
My pet snake, Reggie.
Yep, that's him. Isn't that crazy?
Man.
So what was the pilot's name? Is it Jacques? It's Jacques, right?
It was. It was. I hate snakes, Jacques.
I hate him. Yeah.
That's brilliant.
Frank Marshall. Brilliant.
This movie just sort of defined iconic. It defined, you know what else it defined for? It defined sunsets for me.
Because of
that scene. There's that scene at when they're digging. They're digging on the hill, and it's that perfectly two-dimensional sunset diorama scene.
Right,
visually,
with silhouettes.
Visually, it's when he's putting the hat on and he's got his head kind of cocked sideways. It really sort of defined what a man's supposed to look like.
Yes, and that is what I look like.
It's like you are also iconic. Talk to me about special effects in this movie. I'm fascinated. Industrial Light and Magic did the effects, and when you think of ILM, you certainly don't. I would not have. I mean, not knowing better, just judging by the work, most of the effects in this movie seem very, very practical.
They were, and I think. This was back in the day before Industrial Light and Magic, obviously. ILM, was doing anything.
There was no CG, right?
Yeah, right. There was all before the day. And let's just cross our fingers that when this finally does make it to Blu-ray, that we're not looking at CG changes to it. But yeah, they were really big ever since pretty much, I think, Star Wars. They really started doing a lot of effects and getting out there. And practical effects is what it was all about. The another thing from my fantastic special effects book from the 80s was how they did all those clouds when the Ark, when they opened the Ark, and you have those amazing clouds in the sky over this little island. In order to create clouds back then, they would actually use liquids. They would use different liquids. They would have a tank of water, and then they would have, I'm not sure what type of liquids they were, like mercury or something, and they would pour it into the water, and they would film it, and it would not mix with the water. It would keep itself separate, but it would create this like cloudy look, and they would film that and then put it onto the actual film as a plate, and you'd get those amazing cloud formations in the sky. They did a lot of that, I believe, in Close Encounters of the Third Kind as well.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Yeah. So
that's a lot of I'm just surprised because I watched through this movie, and you know what doesn't stick out at me is clumsiness. Right, there was no part in there where I thought that is an obvious miniature. Right. I think I can think of one thing in the movie that somebody actually had to show me many years after I saw it that I didn't notice on my own. But I can think of one thing that sticks out at me as kind of an effects flub, and it's the snake that strikes at Indy.
Oh, you can see the glass.
You can
reflection.
see the glass. Right.
Yeah, right.
But I couldn't tell that. I had to be told it. I hate the people who do that to me.
Well, when you're involved in the story, you don't want to. Right. You're not pulling yourself out thinking of those things. And when a story is this good, it is kind of hard to pull yourself out. There's not. In fact, even the giant boulder that's rolling toward Indy in the very beginning was like 200 some pounds of papier-mâché. It was this giant ball that they actually made. It was a big physical ball that they made. And when Harrison Ford trips, that's him like really scrambling to get up because he doesn't want to be rolled over by this actual giant ball. He's trying to outrun this very physical object, and you don't get that anymore.
No, you don't get that with the. You wouldn't have gotten that with the green screen boulder.
No, exactly.
It's really. I mean, that's. I think that's one of the standout bits about this movie is just how expert the story lets you get away from lets you escape from any of the filmmaking issues, which there were a few. I mean, it's what is it about these guys? So Lawrence Kasdan, the way the story goes, as I understand it, is George Lucas had this idea for this movie, Indiana Smith,
right?
Raiders of the Lost Ark, or Indiana Smith and the Raiders of the Lost Ark. Is that what the original one was?
I think it was just called The Adventures of Indiana Smith.
That's what it was. It's just, hindsight is what it is, but that just sounds so stupid.
It really does.
It's really stupid. So he had this idea.
It's Lucas.
He's such a and so he has this idea, and he goes and he sits down with his buddy Philip Kaufman. He was working on it. The way I understand, he was working on it simultaneously with Empire Strikes Back. Right? And
no, not Empire Strikes Back. The original Star Wars.
Because you're right, and he shelved it to do Star Wars.
Right, exactly.
And then he was vacationing with Steven Spielberg, and it was actually Steven Spielberg who said, Smith is stupid. You got to go with something else. And also wanted to make Indiana Jones a drunk, an alcoholic.
That's interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah, it apparently was a very dark vision of Indiana Jones, which would have been a disaster. It just would have been a different movie. It's not the same movie. But it was then Lawrence Kasdan and Philip Kaufman. Now, Lawrence Kasdan we know from Empire, right?
Empire Strikes Back. Didn't he do The Big Chill?
Yeah, The Big Chill. And Philip Kaufman, we just said it.
Well, he left this project because Clint Eastwood asked him to come do the Outlaw Josie Wales, right?
But it was
because up until then he was working on it with George.
What is the difference between when you get a story credit versus a screenplay credit? Can you?
Well, a story credit is generally like you helped kind of create the concept. You kind of helped lay out what was going to be happening without necessarily sitting down and banging out the actual screenplay. Now, my understanding is that there are times where you may have worked on the screenplay, but the WGA, Writers Guild of America, acknowledges that you did have some say in what happened, but not enough to actually be considered one of the actual screenwriters. So they would perhaps just give you a story credit if there were elements in the story that are clearly yours. Then you may just get a story credit, and that's what happened with Mr. Kaufman
and George Lucas.
Right, because the two of them together pretty much came up with the story.
Right. And it was Lawrence Kasdan who sat down and wrote the actual screenplay.
Right, based on all the ideas that they had and everything. Right. So, and not to say that he didn't contribute his own when he worked on the screenplay too. In fact, it's entirely possible that he was involved in the story too. He just didn't end up getting the story credit because he got the sole screenwriting credit.
Yeah, I was just going to say, which do you shoot for? You want the screenplay, right?
Yeah, screenwriting credit I think is the one that you'd really want. I don't think there's a reason he would have said I only want screenwriting credit. I think he may have also fought to get a story credit, but he didn't because he got sole screenwriting credit. There's all these negotiations and backroom hagglings with any of these types of credits, and there is a lot of hemming and hawing with the WGA and everyone else about who's going to get what credit. If they're not really fighting about it, the people just kind of figure it out on their own. If it's something that people are really arguing, then the WGA may step in, but I don't think that was the case with this one.
So you get these guys. Now these guys they just feel them. It feels to me like these guys are part of a club, right? Doesn't it a little bit? It does. This time they were there was about a decade and a half where these guys were making all the movies. They were making the movies that stick with us. And what have they done? What have they done for me lately?
Well, Spielberg's still active.
Yeah, no, he's good, but he was.
But yeah, Kasdan. I think the last one I remember of his was wasn't it something with was it Jason Lee where he's like a counselor coming to or he's a fake psychiatrist or something. That
was Lawrence Kasdan,
wasn't it? I feel like that was his last movie. Let me look.
Fake psychiatrist.
Yeah.
Well, because he did
Mumford. That was not his last one. That was actually 1999.
Oh my goodness.
But he hasn't done much since. He actually was the writer, director, and producer of Dreamcatcher. Yeah. The poor guy. I don't know why.
Dreamcatcher. That was the Stephen King, right?
That was the Stephen King one.
With the toilet scene. Oh my God.
Yeah, that's pretty gruesome. That's the one Stephen King wrote when he was all hopped up on his meds from after getting hit by that lady.
Spending all his time in the John.
Imagining his
So he did, but he did.
He
has a string of also awesome movies. I liked Wyatt Earp a lot.
Yeah, I haven't seen that one.
Please.
One day I will.
It's on the list.
It feels tedious, but I'm sure.
The Bodyguard was tedious, but very popular. Apparently, the ladies liked it.
I enjoyed The Bodyguard.
Silverado, come on, Silverado.
Silverado had its moments.
But you see what I'm saying? We go the further back in time we go, the better that guy gets.
Yeah, exactly. Well, look at the beginning. The first thing he has writing credits for is The Empire Strikes Back.
Exactly.
I mean, how does that get to be your first writing credit?
Please.
So and then Raiders Body Heat, which I think is probably one of my favorite films of the 80s.
That was Kathleen Turner, right?
Kathleen Turner and William Hurt,
She was there was another, wow, I shouldn't have seen that movie when I did. Body Heat, Continental Divide was fantastic, and then Star Wars: Return of the Jedi and Big Chill, Silverado. So there you go. That guy's
Accidental Tourist.
That guy's first was that another William Hurt, right?
Yep.
Yeah, that was a snoozer.
I mean, look at it, and then but it was a really good story. And then he ended that 10-year reign with "I Love You to Death," which, as I recall, I really hated. But he had 10 years there where he was
cranking
for the most
out
part
great,
rock solid. Yeah,
great adult contemporary adventure movies, right? I mean, great adventure film. So there's Lawrence Kasdan, Philip Kaufman.
He's one of those guys who's done a lot of the big thing that I think he's known for is The Right Stuff. The
Right Stuff. But look at okay. Now seriously, that guy's got he's got some more interesting things going on for him.
Well, he did an Invasion of the Body Snatchers, which
right?
I think would be another fun series to go through all the Body Snatchers stories. And that one I think I really enjoy. That's the one with Donald Sutherland.
That was certainly the best one.
I really like that one.
But he also, it's interesting. He's got credit for, let's see, I don't know anything about it. So 1964 is his first story credit, right? His first writing credit. Goldstein. I've never heard of Goldstein.
Nor have I.
Or Fearless Frank. Or frankly, the Great Northfield, Minnesota Raid. All hits, but then look at he gets pulled off. The next film he does as a writer is Outlaw Josie Wales, The Wanderers, Raiders of the Lost Ark, The Right Stuff, The Unbearable Lightness of Being, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, Raiders of the Lost Ark, the adaptation. I don't know what that is. Henry and June, terrific film. Mm-hmm. No idea what Indiana Jed is. That makes me. I think that may be where it sort of falls. But Rising Sun, really terrific movie.
Yeah, I didn't see that one.
Oh,
yeah.
No, it's a shame. But then what is this? Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, and it goes down here. But he took a 20-year break where I guess he was directing and.
He did Quills.
Yeah, Twisted.
I think Quills is the last thing of his that I've seen, but I mean, he really hasn't done a lot.
But look, I mean, the Wanderers, The Right Stuff, Unbearable Lightness of Being, and Henry and June. He had a good stretch.
Oh, he really did.
He really did. Of just some terrific, terrific films.
Yeah.
Made some good choices. Okay, but he's got a whole lot of nothing. He's working, but I don't see a lot of really very interesting
stuff.
Not much. And then Lucas, who spent the last 20 years,
tinkering,
robbing the bank, and just going back to the bank again and again and again.
Yeah.
So you sort of wonder where this club.
And Spielberg, don't forget him. I mean, he's.
Yeah, I know. I sort of leave him out of the list because seriously, I mean, Catch Me If You Can, AI, Schindler's List, Saving Private Ryan, please.
Yeah, I mean, he definitely has some stinkers that he's done, but for the most part, I think he's rightfully placed at the top of cinema today.
Yeah.
I mean, I think he's just a stellar filmmaker. He knows how to tell a story. He knows how to make a film. And I think.
Well, here's the interesting thing about that.
He deserved to be walking in the Olympics, doing his little whatever it was that he was doing.
The thing about that Spielberg is, there really isn't anything that he's done that I've seen with him as a director that I just haven't liked, right? That I haven't really enjoyed. I'm trying to think of something that I really didn't like. I mean, he's directed, some 50 movies?
Yep.
And I can't think of one that I have seen of his that I haven't enjoyed. War of the Worlds. I liked War of the Worlds.
I did too. It had its problems, but I still liked it. I think the ones that I would say I didn't like,
except Crystal Skull, of course.
You're right. Yeah. Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, which I think was just terrible. The only other one that I think I liked at the time and I have grown to not like now is Hook. I enjoyed it a lot when it came out when I was younger, and I don't know, it's just one of those films that just I don't think has aged well. And then I will jump all the way back to 1941, and I will be honest, I am definitely not one of the people who is in the camp on that one. I know there's like this little camp of people who think it's one of the funniest movies ever, but I've never been in that camp.
I'm going to tell you, I've never seen that.
Don't watch it.
Right.
It's it was him and Robert Zemeckis. Again, here's that other part of that club.
Exactly.
It's this movie that they thought would just be just hysterical, and they all think it is still. And they kind of acknowledge that most people don't. We all have those. I've made some short films that I think are really funny that a lot of people don't. But I think that kind of falls into that camp for them.
I think it's funny. I think everything you do is funny.
Oh, thank you.
I think, though, and this was my long-winded point, I think as an executive producer, I start to question. But I start to question because the movies, it's like he's choosing projects to produce that suddenly don't appeal to me anymore. Although, to be fair, I mean, True Grit, True Grit, Lovely Bones, I have not seen Super 8, but boy, that movie seems like right up my alley.
The thing about Spielberg being a producer is if you can get him attached to your film, you can get it made.
Yeah.
So that's, I think, the benefit to him. And actually, I have an interesting little factoid here, if I can find it, about how much money people make and all of that. And he's one of those people who makes a ridiculous amount of money basically working like as a consultant now. I mean, that's, I think, how he gets all of the credits that he gets as an executive producer as producer, because he kind of comes on board and gives people, oh, well, this is what you can do to fix it and make it better. And by the way, I get an executive producer credit on that and pay me $80,000 or something like that.
That's why you get his name attached to projects like Real Steel.
Which, hey, don't knock Real Steel.
That was funny too. You just did another one. Don't knock you out, Real Steel.
Oh,
knock it out. I haven't seen it yet. Is it good? Do we like it? It's Rock'em Sock'em Robots.
But it was so good. It's more than Rock'em Sock'em Robots. There's an actual a story of the heart there with father and son. And
story of the heart. Listen to you.
I just was sucked right into that one. Okay, here it is.
Right.
So this was 2009. This little document I have, Film Industry by the Numbers. In 2009, Steven Spielberg was the second top earner in Hollywood, right behind Michael Bay, who directed Transformers 2. Michael Bay made $125 million in 2009. Steven Spielberg made $85 million, and that money came off of his part of the Universal theme park royalties and consulting.
Wow.
$85
million.
Theme park royalties and consulting.
That may be your future. You may be.
I would love that to be my future. If I could make $85 million a year just doing that, I'd love it.
Wow.
And that's actually something I don't think that he necessarily goes into getting involved in films for this particular reason, but it is smart getting involved in movies that have potential for an afterlife outside of just, the $5 bin in your local Walmart. Getting involved in a movie that has potential to become rides and actually be a part of a theme park and all that. I mean, that's huge.
That's big. Yeah, that's big. I feel like we wandered a bit off course, but I have one other character that I sort of feel like we need to talk about. Talk about the unsung hero of this movie is that old Denholm Elliott.
Ah, yes.
He's a fascinating. You don't see much of him in this movie, and yet for some reason he totally sticks out to me as my granddad.
I mean, we're talking about Brody, Marcus Brody, who was a fantastic character who, is kind of the connection for Indiana Jones to his father, right?
Mm-hmm.
That
was the purpose of his character in the first movie. He was a device in the first movie, right?
Right.
I think that's an important distinction because he changed from the first movie to the third movie, right?
Yeah. Well, and I think that they did to his character, going from the first to the third movie, what they did to the character of Marion going to the fourth movie.
Right.
I think they turned him into just like kind of a buffoon. And as much as I enjoy the third movie, a lot of those moments that just kind of turn, into just silliness just always, frustrate me when we see Marcus Brody unable to ride his horse and he's riding off, practically falling off, and just all that sort of stuff. I mean, I know
good.
that. No, and I'm sure that in their minds, trying to stick with the idea of the serials and not be so serious and all that is maybe what they were going for. But I think that it was not fair to the character of Brody to kind of make him that.
Here's so the on your point of humor. The rumor of the infamous gun versus whip. Is that true that was improvised? Is that your understanding?
That's what I hear.
Way I understand it is they had been working and practicing on he was supposed to do so I don't know who it is, the Shah swordsman comes out with his scimitar, and he does this fancy whipping around the sword around his head, and he does this intimidating dance of evil with his scimitar. And what was supposed to happen, and what was scripted, was that Indiana Jones was supposed to do an intimidating dance of whippiness. And, And it had been a long day of shooting, and he was tired, and eventually at take 98, he pulled out his gun and shot the guy.
Yeah.
And that's the take they took. Improvised. Apparently there's a lot in the movie that was improvised, but that's the one that really stuck.
Well, and it's a great one, and they were probably kicking themselves
but
after
they didn't think of it,
going,
right?
wow, yeah, why didn't we do that to begin with? I mean, it's just one of those genius moments, and it allowed for a great motif to come back in the second movie.
Yeah.
Because the exact same thing happens, except this time, he doesn't have his gun, and so he has to face this guy. And so it was a nice little way to tie that back.
Oh, man, I'm a tool. I hadn't made that connection either.
Oh, my goodness, you're kidding.
What am I even doing on this show?
I bet you did make that connection. I bet you just forgot you made that connection.
I do. I skipped the second movie and the fourth's in my head, in canon.
All these people that we're talking about, all these, wonderful actors, I think one character that we have not talked about at all is the music. And the genius
talk
of
about
Williams.
being in. He was another guy that was in that club, and he got out of it. He got out of it okay.
Oh yeah, I mean he's I think probably become one of the most prolific and powerful symphonic score composers and conductors out there.
Do you like his stuff?
I love his stuff. When it comes to symphonic film score, I think he's one of the tops. I mean, you've got he's kind of the more modern version of like the Bernstein, like the Elmer Bernstein, and then Jerry Goldsmith's kind of in that club. You have a lot of these composers that were doing some great stuff with music, really giving you an amazing emotional connection to the film.
It was sad though. I think he lost on this one to Vangelis.
Well, gosh, you're right. He did. That's pretty interesting.
Because that's that doesn't stick with me. Vangelis, the Chariots of Fire theme. I get that. I can get the first couple of bars in my head, but beyond that, I lose it. And the Raiders March is classic.
The thing about the score for Indiana Jones or for Raiders of the Lost Ark, I think, is that I think the Raiders March is probably the most well-known piece from it. But I think that a lot of the other music in the film actually is, in my mind, it actually is better than the Raiders March. Like the theme for the Ark and the music when he's in the
chamber, the snake,
the not the chamber, but is it the where the map room?
The map room, yeah.
And the moment where the light comes through and illuminates the where the Ark is buried. Just the music build in that scene is just so powerful, and it's just phenomenal. I think that was the genius of and still is the genius of John Williams, is he's able to create all these amazing themes and still tie them all together and connect them and make this amazingly cohesive package.
Well, and when you look at the movie, the sort of musical arc of the movie, it goes from this sort of the proud Raiders March, the mysterious and sort of haunting Ark theme, and really whimsical basket chase. Which that does sort of harken to the 50s, to the serials. It's that it just moves along, so it's very peppy.
It is.
And then, I don't know, we should do a whole, I guess we could really get into a whole thing on John Williams, but then you get into, come on. So much of it sounds a lot like each other. You compare the themes, the non-iconic themes from Raiders to the supplemental music from Star Wars, and you got the same music. They're practically interchangeable.
I don't think so. The only reason
I'm going to do it. I'm going to recut Star Wars with Raiders, and I'm just going to see if you even notice. I bet you don't. I'll bet you don't. Dimes to donuts, you don't.
The thing about those moments in the film that you're forgetting is that they use elements of the themes in them, and that's why you would never be able to successfully pull that off. So even when you have those little moments like the truck chase where he's hanging off the front or whatever, there's still going to be enough of whether it's the bits from the Raiders March coming up or da, 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 da,
da, da. You're not going to tell. That is as good as it better Raiders in Superman.
And now you're jumping into Superman.
That's right. Yeah.
No, I'll always be able to tell. Although I will say that composers do often steal from themselves. They can be notorious for doing that. I think James Horner is probably guilty of that more than any other composer that I know of. I think John Williams actually does a good job for the most part of keeping his bits
The problem
separate.
is James Horner actually steals so much from John Williams. And but the score to Glory was beautiful and so Williams.
It was not.
It was so Williams. Please.
Oh, it wasn't. It was a genius James Horner score.
If we
give him creds he deserves.
If we lived closer, I would set up a sound system in your front yard, and I would just blast it in the middle of the night. I would blast all of it just on rotation.
That'd be awesome.
This is awesome. So give me some final thoughts. Why does this movie for you hold up so well?
It's just a flawless, timeless film. This is a film you can watch in 1981. It's a film you can watch in 2011, and it doesn't feel dated in any way. I think the effects were done so well. The story is told so well. It's a tight story. It's full of action. It's full of emotion. You can connect to the characters, whatever your age range. It's something for everybody. I mean, it truly is, not just age, but of time. And I think that is what makes a classic film. And whenever you first see this film, I guarantee that it will be something that will end up sticking with you forever. And just a random side note.
Yeah.
If a movie is amazing enough to make it into the great movie ride at Walt Disney World, then you know
it's arrived.
That's right.
that's good. It is a fantastic film. It borrows from all the right places, and it creates an incredibly well-paced action adventure that just taps into the very core of who you are as a child.
Yeah, it does.
Even as an adult, this is that movie. So next time we are going to talk about Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom.
Excellent.
Is it?
I still love that movie. I know I'm one of the few, but I'm very excited to talk about that one.
I'm gonna find the stones. I want those. I do remember. I remember the chase for the stones, finding the stones. I remember all the kids, and maybe it was. I don't know. I don't know if Short Round didn't age well with me. I don't know what it was, but
they took it. They definitely took it into the silly realm with that one a little more than they did with Raiders.
You think that's where you're gonna lay that? They took it into the silly realm. That thing was a freaking pool of plastic balls. It was so silly.
The
rolling shield. Oh my goodness!
People who complain about that movie.
I'm ready for your global generalization about me. Go ahead.
No.
You just said it.
Yes, I did. People who say that about the second movie, but are unwilling to say that about the third movie, are full of it, because the third one is equally full of just cheese.
I'm that guy. I guess I'm full of it, Andy.
You're full of it. I guess we'll just talk about how full of it you are next time.
Well, we'll see. Maybe you should actually watch this movie again with a critical eye.
Maybe you should watch it with the silly glasses off that you take off when you're watching the third one.
You have silly glasses.
I do, don't you?
All right, I gotta go. I gotta go to bed.
Here at The Next Reel, we've been passionately discussing movies week after week since 2011. That's a lot of movies and a lot of conversation.
Sure is, Pete, and to be honest, it's a lot of work too, but it's work that we love. If you have been enjoying our show, we'd like to remind you that there are ways to support us even if you're not able to become a member just yet. You might have heard us talk about our new watch page, where we've listed every movie that we've talked about paired with Amazon or Apple links to rent or buy the movie.
Now we'd like to introduce you to our originals page. Let's take a trip down memory lane, Andy. Do you remember what the first film we discussed on The Next Reel was that was an adaptation?
Well, let's see. It wasn't obviously our Indiana Jones series, because those were all original. Then we did Charlie Kaufman. Oh, of course. It was adaptation from Susan Orlean's Orchid Thief.
Exactly. We have covered quite a few adaptations over the years, and now we're providing a way for our listeners to delve into the original source material.
That's right. Just head over to thenextreel.com/originals, and you can see the list of all the adaptations that we have discussed.
From our David Fincher series, featuring The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, The Social Network, Zodiac, Benjamin Button, and Fight Club,
to our Paranoia trilogy with The Parallax View and All the President's Men, we have covered a variety of adaptations.
Those were some great discussions, especially Fight Club. And let's not forget our baseball series with The Natural and Field of Dreams, adapted from Shoeless Joe.
And Up in the Air and Thank You for Smoking. So many memorable conversations.
Absolutely. And you know what's exciting? Each purchase you make through our links doesn't cost you any extra, but a percentage goes to support The Next Reel and our family of shows.
You can support us while diving deeper into these fantastic stories, whether it's the paper, audiobook, or Kindle version.
We've also included plays and movies. If they were the source, we've put it on there.
So what are you waiting for? Head to thenextreel.com/originals, support The Next Reel, and get your next great read today.
I'm off to reread Fight Club. Now, where did I put my Kindle?